welcome back to Bean Talk. This is number 5 of our Bean Talk Coffee Masterclass. And as you can see right here, today is all about grinders. Specifically, I want to tell you what differences there are in different kinds of grinders. And of course, if you want to buy a new one, what you want to look out for. We have these 4 different grinders here. If you're looking at these 3 and then that one's of course the one sticking out. Because this one, as you can see, is a hand grinder, meaning you actually have to grind the beans by hand. While you can make an espresso even with a hand grinder, it takes forever and is very exhausting. That's why I would recommend to get an electrical espresso grinder like these are, because they have electric motor that of course turns the burrs, then grinding your coffee. On the topic of burrs, while we have talked about this in a previous video as well, I want to talk one more time about the differences in burrs. Specifically, we're talking about the different kinds of burrs, meaning you have conical burrs. The advantage of conical burrs is that you have a higher range or bigger range of different grind sizes you can produce with it. That's, for example, why the Comandante, like this one, uses it. So you have a high range from very fine ground coffee, very finely ground coffee, to very coarsely ground coffee, as you would need for filter coffee, for example. While there's also flat burrs, which most of the espresso grinders use, and flat burrs are more specifically made for one range of grind size. So usually they're made for espresso. There are also some that are for filter coffee, of course. So those are the 2 different kinds. So there's many people that favor one over the other, but in my opinion, it always comes down to the specific grinder you're using the burrs with, and also the coffee and kind of brewing method you're using. So I wouldn't say that one is necessarily better than the other. However, I usually always work with espresso grinders that use flat burrs. Let's talk about the 3 grinders we have here. We have here a Eureka Mignon single dose grinder. Then we have here the G20 by La Cimbali, and then the Bentwood Vertical 63. The reason why I chose these 3 grinders is to show the little differences. Of course, you have here the G20, which is more your classical kind of grinder that you're probably most familiar with. So this is a very, very nice grinder for home use, or maybe it's a second or third grinder in a cafe, for example, for decaf coffee or something. You have your hopper here that stores the coffee before it goes down here into the grinding chamber. What you have here as well is a little display. You can actually set 2 different doses for your double espresso or single espresso. Usually, in my opinion, you should only use the double espresso, because I would always recommend to always brew a double espresso rather than brewing a single espresso. But anyways, you can set this. In this case, it's time-based. So for example, here, it would dispense coffee for 12 seconds. And it would start when you press the little actuator here with your portafilter. If you compare this to this grinder, then this one, as the name already says, is a single dose grinder. What does single dosing mean? This means that rather to have a hopper with a bunch of coffee already stored in it and the option to program a dose. This is more for people that like to try a few different kinds of coffees, that change regularly, that always have 3 bags of coffee at home, like I do. The huge advantage here is that you have a tilted angle compared to here of the burrs, meaning that the burrs are not like this, but they have a bit of an angle, so that more of the coffee gets out. Ideally, you don't want anything stuck in the chamber, but if you do, this actually can blow out the air like this. So how I would usually use a single dose grinder is by taking one of these jars that it usually comes with and your scale, and then you would measure the coffee before you put it in. For example, if you want to use 19 grams of coffee, then you put your 19 grams of coffee inside, then put it in here and grind it. And then you should have your 19 grams inside here. And also very important, your grinding chamber should be empty. In case you either want to refine the grind size and go coarser or finer, or want to use a different coffee, you can just change it and you don't have any coffee stuck inside anymore. We also have our big boy over here, which is the bentwood grinder, and this is a professional grinder. So as you can already see, the size is of course much bigger than the other grinders, and this is because of a few reasons. Of course, on one side, this grinder uses larger bursts. With one rotation, it can crush more beans, but that also generates more heat. In the backside, you have a fan that ventilates the burst, keeping it cool. And then of course, also a much larger motor compared to the other two. What is also important with grinding isn't only the dose you're using, whether this is time-based as with these two, or you pre-weigh it like with this one, but of course also the grind size. If you look at this grinder, for example, when you want to change the grind size with this grinder, you actually have to do it here. Because changing the grind size, what this actually does is just, if you have your bursts, either go closer if you want to go finer, or you want to set it further apart for making it coarser. With these two, you actually have here this little wheel that you can turn and then therefore change the grind size. And always remember, if you go to the smaller number, it's finer, and to the bigger number is coarser. This is the same with all of these grinders. But with this grinder here, for example, this is really cool because here, if it's aligned, you can actually set the microns, meaning the actual size of the crushed beans, which is quite cool because then it's universal. Then you always know, okay, I want my espresso at, I don't know, 180 microns. So you set it to this, and if you have another bentwood, you can set it to this as well. So this actually works quite well. If you want to know how you know whether you should go coarser or finer with your coffee, then you can also check out one of our latest videos. In our Espresso 101 video, we specifically also talk about the grind size and how you know whether you should go coarser or finer with your grind size. So now comes the big question. Which of these grinders should you buy? And this of course also comes down to your budget and what you want to spend on your coffee grinder. However, I would highly recommend to spend a little bit less maybe on the espresso machine and invest more to the grinder, because the grinder is one equipment that gets overlooked far too often. It makes such a huge difference if you have a good grinder, and also working with it is much more of a pleasure. So yeah, let's talk about prices first. So these two grinders both come down to around 600-700 euros. Then the Comandante is, I think right now it's around 300 euros. And then we have our big boy, the bentwood, which is 3,000 euros. So of course there's quite a huge gap in the prices. These two are for home use, while this one is really for professional use. While I know there's some people that have that kind of cash and will buy one for home, I mean, definitely go for it. It's a phenomenal grinder. But if you're just getting into the coffee game, you really don't have to spend that much money. So unless you have a huge budget, let's talk about these two grinders for your espresso setup at home. The question now is, do you want a grinder where you can program the dose and you have a large hopper, or do you want a single dose grinder? So this usually comes down to whether you usually stick with one sort of coffee or always drink one bag at a time, or if you have multiple bags of coffee at home and want to try around a little bit more. This is the question you have to find out for yourself. Both of these grinders are really great. They make an amazing espresso. But yeah, whether you want to single dose your coffee, which is also a little bit of more effort, of course, because every time you make a coffee, you have to dose it into your little dosing cup, while here you can just push the button. If you live alone, you're the only one using a grinder, then of course this one is fine. This one works perfectly. You can dose every cup, play around a little bit more. But if you're in a household with more people that are coffee drinkers, it's probably easier if you get one of these grinders. I hope this video could help you a little bit about finding out which grinder you should buy, you want for your home. As you know, this was not a highly scientific video where I talked about the RPM, the diameter of the burst or whatever, and the effects that it has on the coffee, because this is supposed to be more a beginner video and helping people to get into the coffee world and without the need of using too much random vocabulary. And on that note, make sure to watch our next video if you're looking to buy an espresso machine, because in that video I want to talk about what differences there are in espresso machines and also how they actually function, what is inside an espresso machine, what makes it work. So yeah, if you're interested in that as well, make sure to hit the subscribe button and the bell. You'll be notified when we drop our next video. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video and could learn a little bit about the beautiful world of coffee grinders. Until next time, drink loads of coffee. Bye.